Hello and welcome to Bud Explains, where I take a subject, be that rules, history or concept, from the role-playing world and try to explain it to you in a way that I hope helps you understand how it works. Today's explanation is PISCES and Delta Green, Part 2. Again, please note that this is generally considered handler-only information, so watch at your own risk. Whereas Delta Green began life as a shady black-budget operation to defend America from unnatural threats and ended up being an illegal conspiracy of people who do whatever it takes to fulfill their mission, the Paranormal Intelligence Section for Counterintelligence Espionage and Sabotage, or PISCES for short, had different beginnings. In 1893, the Admiralty's Intelligence Department of Britain had the service of self-proclaimed psychics and seers for Project Delphi, with the intention of using their abilities to track enemy warships at sea. These experiments were mostly a failure, as almost all of them ended up being charlatans. That was for except one, an Arthur Colby, who proved accurate in pinpointing ships of Her Majesty's fleet and the enemy as long as they were near the shore. Colby had previously worked with Scotland Yard, as he had used his talents to locate objects and missing persons. His technique was by visualising the ship and whatever surrounded it, and meditating on some object that was on the ship, and his visions were cross-referenced with photographs and images he had seen in his mind. For some reason, this ability did not work while the ship was at sea, as there were no landmarks to use as a reference. The plan was to teach Colby to navigate using the stars. However, despite a success that could be demonstrated, Delphi was disbanded in 1896. That, however, was not the end of it. A young spiritualist and highly ranked Mason, Lieutenant Commander Frederick Ramsay, continued his studies of the unnatural, actively looking for news reports on psychics and those with apparent mental abilities, submitting these reports to the Royal Navy, though Delphi was never reopened and his obsession limited his career trajectory. In 1900 he resigned his commission and journeyed across the world looking for people with extraordinary abilities, spending most of his wealth on his quest, taking him 7 years to do so. He established a teaching foundation called the Ramsay Institute for Psychical Education, a place where people could visit to have their psychic abilities measured, with the fees he charged supporting him and his travels. All of this money and time that Ramsay spent uncovered only 7 people that had anything approaching real abilities. Then the Great War came, and in its darkest time in 1916 he was approached by Captain Mansfield Cumming, the father of MI6, who wanted to revive Delphi to track German U-boats as the blockade of Britain seemed to have no end in sight and the Royal Navy were desperate. Ramsay agreed to join MI6 in order to form a department that would study unconventional methods of espionage and reconnaissance, gathering all of the genuine talent he had encountered and searching for more. Cumming set aside a portion of his budget and had it designated to MI13, the Special Reconnaissance Section. They temporarily set up a HQ in Hampden Castle on the border of Scotland, and using emergency powers designated to him, he had special talents he had found abroad brought to him, being able to show actual results by 1917. This impressed Cumming, who agreed to give them improved funding. As the war ended, Ramsay's talents could give valuable, accurate intelligence on the movements of the German military, occasionally before they happened. However, these predictions were not often acted upon without confirmation from intelligence, as they believed the information to be extremely subjective due to it only being evaluated by the psychic themselves. At the end of the war, Ramsay had been promoted to commander with a staff of 70 that included 20 genuine talents who had made advances in sharpening their abilities. Cumming was knighted and continued his support of MI13 until his retirement in 1923, with him dying from ill health 2 months later. Due to Cummings' death, MI13 came under bureaucratic attack, though Ramsay fought hard to keep his budget and talent spotting, though his budget into the biological research around spotting talent vanished, forcing him to let his 20 wartime talents be dropped, though work with them on a freelance basis continued. That was until the disaster of 1925. On February the 28th, 1925, his talents started having odd dreams. They were unable to specify what about them was strange, just that they made them uncomfortable. These dreams continued to affect the talent, disturbing their sleep and distracting them daily. In the first week of March, some of them reported remembering snippets of the dreams. They told of having visions of undersea cities built from dark stone. And then, on the 23rd of March, terror gripped all of Ramsay's talents, causing 2 of them to take their own lives. One drowned in Portsmouth, leaving a note that she was following her call to the great throne of Rel Yar. The other 18 all suffered degrees of mental degradation, with 5 of them going completely insane. Then, on the 2nd of April 1925, the 13 who had suffered mental collapse all started making recoveries at an accelerated and unexpected rate. This left Ramsay at a loss as to what had happened, and he spent the next 7 years looking for answers, though this only created more questions in the realms of parapsychology and metaphysics. Suspicions that were confirmed when he met Major David Cornwall in 1926. Cornwall, a veteran of the Great War, had been a long-time student of preternatural phenomena. This began for him in 1916, when he led a group of soldiers into no man's land to clear out a colony of ghouls on a top-secret mission, kept this way as it was deemed that troop morale would be negatively affected. Cornwall completely bought into this by adding a further layer of disinformation to his report, saying that it was an operation against shell-shocked cannibal deserters. He knew that the monsters his men had defeated were not human, and was not willing to tell the truth and end up in an asylum. Following the end of the Great War, he took all opportunities to examine events he deemed preternatural, and developed a reputation for being an exceptional counterintelligence officer. Cornwall often took leave to investigate these events. Ramsay became aware of Cornwall in 1926 while serving in Istanbul, when he exposed several officials of the Turkish government as being members of a sect of the Brotherhood of the Skin. After this event, Cornwall took retirement at the age of 34, mostly due to the British Foreign Office being unimpressed with his unsanctioned activities. After much persuading, Ramsay persuaded Cornwall to join him in MI13, and they spent the next 6 years on a dark quest to answer the madness of 1925. Sadly, in the April of 1932, Ramsay had a cardiac arrest while working late in his office and subsequently died. Though some whispered that he had been assassinated, Cornwall held firm to the belief that he had finally worked out what had troubled his talents, and the subsequent realisation of the enormity of it all had finished him off. In actuality, Ramsay and Cornwall had discovered the terrible truth about the Great Old Ones, foretold to return to sweep humanity aside and take control of Earth. Ramsay had worked out that one of these Great Old Ones was still here, sleeping at the bottom of the Pacific. Great Cthulhu had stirred and almost driven every psychic that Ramsay knew to the brink of madness, and perhaps the thought of what could happen to mankind should ever awaken was what caused his death. When Ramsay died, MI13 was simply a few officers in Whitehall, with only Cornwall, 2 research assistants and 5 secretaries remaining. Due to their investigations into the legends of the Great Old Ones, they'd made many contacts amongst various occult and spiritualist communities across Western Europe. Due to this, MI13 was in a good position to give information on some of the occult practices amongst the Nazi elite, being the ones who exposed the Karatechia, proving their military worth to the intelligence establishment, thus preventing them from being disbanded, though their budget was not increased and some agents that Ramsay and Cornwall had developed were reproportioned to MI6, though they would truly prove their worth at the time of the Nazi blitzkrieg of France. On the 1st of May 1940, a former MI13 talent, Amanda Chalmers, who had left after the Great War, had a premonition that the German advance into Belgium was a ruse designed to draw the British Expeditionary Force and French Army into Belgium to cut them off by the German Army Group A through the Ardennes forest, which was deemed impassable. Her premonition was dismissed by the Chief of the General Staff as a Luftwaffe plane carrying genuine German invasion plans, or Plan Yellow, had crashed in Belgium. These plans called for a repeat of the World War I Schlieffen Plan, which involved Germany invading France through Belgium, though the Allies didn't know at the time that though the capture plans were genuine, the Germans knew they'd been compromised, so had changed them to advancing through the Ardennes. The British and French fell for the ruse, finding themselves cut off in Belgium, forcing the Allies to withdraw through Dunkirk, with the Wehrmacht and Luftwaffe applying heavy pressure. At a crucial moment, Hitler faltered and told Goering to obliterate the retreating troops. Cornwall came up with a clever plan to prove the value of MI13. He sealed Amanda's prediction in an envelope and left it with the office of Winston Churchill, with instructions for it to be opened on the 5th of June. After the evacuation of Dunkirk, the letter was opened and Churchill read that many of the events that Chalmers had predicted had happened. Despite sceptics in his office, Churchill became a true believer, and though could not publicly admit it, he made sure that MI13 had everything it needed to fight the Nazis, with the first thing they gained being independence. On June 26, 1940, Churchill made MI13 an interagency task force that was funded jointly by 3 other agencies, MI6, MI5 and the newly formed Special Operations Executive or SOE, with the instructions to set Europe ablaze via sabotage, assassination and the support of local resistance fighters. MI13 were redesignated as the Paranormal Intelligence Section for Counterintelligence, Espionage and Sabotage, and thus PISCES was born. The headquarters moved from London to Kilmore Manor in the Scottish Highlands, and they were to report directly to the Prime Minister's office, thereby passing the War Office, MI5, MI6 and the SOE, with all three agencies able to request assistance from PISCES, though PISCES had self-governance as to how their resources would be used. PISCES' support for the counterintelligence agencies was tailored to their specific needs. For example, MI5 had talents with an affinity with telepathy, empathy and psychometry assigned to them. This was used in order to identify, capture and interrogate Nazi agents who were trying to infiltrate England. MI6 had more of a requirement for clairvoyance, who could predict enemy movements, as well as experienced telepaths who could send and receive messages from behind enemy lines in a completely undetectable manner. The SOE required those PISCES talents that they had termed human wireless, i.e. those who could remotely sabotage enemy industrial sites using telekinesis and pyrokinesis, though these were rare and had limited abilities. MI5 found PISCES especially useful during the double-cross system execution for finding and capturing German agents, and their good relationship persists to this day, though MI6 proved to be more difficult to work with, due to them seeing PISCES as a breakaway department and never truly accepting their evidence. Also, the so-called telepathic transmitters proved to be mostly useless in a practical sense, as well as usually only being productive when the talent was in a deep sleep. The SOE and PISCES' collaborations were even less useful due to them being unsuccessful in piercing the Nazi police state, as well as psychic ability being dubious in the realms of assassination and sabotage. This was the official remit of PISCES. However, it would be the agenda of the newly promoted Colonel Cornwall and his fight against the Karatechia that would mould PISCES into an opponent of those forces known as the Mythos. He placed intelligence gathering on the Karatechia at the top of their list of strategic priorities, as he deemed it to be critical to know and understand what the Nazis had been successful in with regard to harnessing paranormal forces, though penetrating the Karatechia proved to be almost impossible. The only point of contact to the Karatechia was via Himmler. The Gestapo, Abwehr and Sicherheitsdienst had no channel to them. Most of what PISCES discovered was via rumours from the spiritualist and occult communities that they maintained contact with. They'd been persecuted by the Gestapo and even pressed into service by the Nazis, with the threat of the concentration camp hanging over them if they refused to serve the Reich. Further information reached PISCES from MI6, who had contact with the Abwehr, including their agency chief Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, who passed information in order to undermine the Nazi regime to hurriedly bring the war to an end. The Abwehr had heard rumours that it was more than death and torture that occurred behind the barbed wire fences of the concentration camps, and rumour was abound that inhuman medical experiments were taking place, using humans as disposable test subjects, and that was the cover for the human sacrifices in what was called pre-Christian Germanic rituals, though confirmation proved impossible. MI6 put pressure on PISCES to provide tangible results, and with the cooperation of the MI6 agent Ian Fleming, the author of the James Bond novels, PISCES arranged for Hess's personal astrologer to provide a prediction that if he flew to England on the 10th of May 1941 in secret, he would find the government willing to surrender. Hess, heeding this prediction, flew to England and was duly captured. This triggered the Nazis into purging spiritualists and psychics across Europe. Hundreds were arrested under an operation called Action Hess and shipped off to concentration camps, with the Karatechia screening them to see if they had the talent or disposition to be recruited. Even during this purge, PISCES managed to place 3 agents inside the Nazis' most secret project, though none of them survived the war. One of them vanished, a second was found out and presumed to have been executed, and the last was shot trying to cross into Switzerland on the New Year's Day of 1943. Before they died, however, they provided Colonel Cornwall with all the proof he needed that the Karatechia were close to incredible powers of madness and destruction. PISCES did not just face the Karatechia in World War II. They also came upon an organisation called the Black Ocean Society in Japan, an ultranationalist terrorist organisation with ties to the Yakuza, who acted as an unofficial arm of Japanese imperial policy, firstly in Korea and then afterwards in Manchuria. They collected political and military intelligence, infiltrated Chinese secret societies, and supported terrorism, with the assassination of Queen Min of Korea in 1895 being their most audacious act. These activities were supported by opium sales and Manchurian mining owned by Black Ocean Society leaders. It was so notorious by 1901 that it was renamed the Black Dragon Society, and following the outbreak of war, PISCES agents squared off with agents of the Black Dragon Society across the Far East. On the other side of the world, PISCES found itself facing off against the Soviet Smersh organisation in Spain in 1941. They did everything short of killing each other to disrupt their operations, and Smersh operatives were deliberately exposed to Spanish authorities during attempts to steal a copy of True Magic by Theophilus Wen, to which Smersh identified British agents to German intelligence, which almost had fatal results. Things improved slightly following the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, but bad blood remained. When America joined the Allied effort against the Axis, Delta Green and Pisces were not immediately introduced, as neither the OSS or British intelligence were willing to admit believing in the power of the occult, and instead they discovered each other by accident. Delta Green agents in Britain were brought to the attention of Pisces due to them operating under the auspices of the OSS and showing an intense interest in Royal Navy records. Delta Green had never lost its interest in underwater civilizations, and these Delta Green agents were monitored by Pisces agents as they proceeded to rummage through Admiralty records going as far back as 1700. Pisces were convinced that the OSS could not be spying on England to gain a strategic advantage, as the things they were looking at were official ships' logs, and they were observing broad patterns of information, not specific events. After weeks of guarded meetings, they both admitted their interest in matters deemed paranormal and compared notes on what they had learned about the Nazis, though pooling their information did not provide any source of comfort. The two agencies performed joint operations in 1942 against the Karatechia during negotiations with the deep ones of Vahu-Yahloa. Pisces agents embedded in the Karatechia managed to communicate the location of the next mass sacrifice, and Delta Green agents alongside French partisans carried out the attack to stunning success. The two agencies regularly cooperated, though contact was broken in 1945 when the OSS and Delta Green were disbanded, and when they reformed in 1947, the Pisces leadership decided not to resume relations as they believed that there could be security leaks due to the disbanding by fickle American politicians. Upon Delta Green being fully established again in the 1950s, they were in no rush to resume communications due to the British security service being riddled with Soviet spies, and similarly Pisces had no desire to work with Delta Green due to their cowboy operations in Africa, Latin America and Southeast Asia being too loud for the more subtle Pisces' taste. When Delta Green were disbanded in the 1970s, Pisces found their original doubts had been justified, and they decided to leave America out of the paranormal picture entirely. Pisces agents would occasionally slip Delta Green agents useful information when it was beneficial, and likewise Delta Green returned the favour on occasion. No interagency contact was ever formalised, being carried out instead by World War II era agents. As time passed and the agents on both sides passed away, the contact also faded. At the end of World War II, the newly promoted Brigadier General Cornwall took steps to make sure the Pisces didn't go the way of MI-13. He wanted them to be a group that pursued servants of the great old ones and not decommissioned as a flight of fancy by the outgoing wartime Prime Minister, Winston Churchill. To do this, he presented the newly elected Clement Attlee with evidence of the Karatechia's activities alongside the information on the Soviet Smersh group that was combing Europe of former Karatechia members and materials in order to continue their dangerous experiments. Pisces was sold to Attlee as a method of keeping tabs on the Soviets' paranormal interests. In 1946, Smersh was disbanded officially but secretly restarted, and Cornwall convinced Attlee that this meant that their research had been successful and they were redoubling their efforts. This ensured that Pisces got whatever it needed to keep up with the Soviets, and this led to a mandate that Cornwall was not comfortable with, that was to experiment with some of the alien sciences that Smersh were working with. Cornwall, unhappy with the idea that his people could unleash some hyperdimensional entity into the world, made the decision that he not only had to protect his people but also the world itself. With this remit in mind, they began looking for a secure environment, and eventually found what they were looking for: an island in the St Kilda archipelago, around 115 miles west of the Outer Hebrides. There are 4 islands: Herta, Dun, Soay and Borroway, along with several sea stacks of rock that rise from the crashing waves. An area known for its violent, unpredictable weather, there is a single safe anchorage, Village Bay on Herta. Originally occupied by shepherds and fishermen, that came to an end in the July of 1930 when they were evacuated by the British government. After surveying the site, Cornwall decided to build the Pisces Medieval Metaphysics Lab in an underground facility carved out of the very rock of Herta. The lab was nicknamed Magonia, after the Celtic legend of it being the home of the fairy folk. Tunnels were cut into the rock and security systems installed, and areas where experiments were to be conducted were reinforced with steel and concrete. Further techniques gleaned from texts in the British Museum were also set in place to further secure the area. In 1959, a thermonuclear weapon was installed underneath Magonia as a final security measure if it was ever breached. So far, it has never been triggered. Additionally, Pisces influenced the Ministry of Defence to place a missile tracking system on the island in the 1950s as a piece of an early warning system. It's manned by Royal Engineers and Royal Artillery, who keep quiet about the visits by helicopter in the middle of the night. Pisces has contributed to Great Britain's counterintelligence operations since its formation. The 1940s and 50s led them to discover more and more evidence of the Great Old One's supernatural influence, usually in situations where desperate people took desperate measures. In 1948, a splinter group of the IRA were found to be using rituals related to the Celtic fertility god, the Green Man. During 1953, Kenyan tribesmen were discovered worshipping a god called Atu as they campaigned against the British colonials. And during the 1954 Malaysian emergency, they discovered that the ethnically Chinese communist guerrillas had a particularly savage and debased minority called the Chow Chows, who seemed more interested in cannibalism and ritual torture than any political agenda. PISCES eliminated these organisations through various legal and non-legal means, and their methods and knowledge were expanded by rituals and metaphysical formulae obtained from the various corners of the British Empire, and allowed them over time to develop a short list of formulae that would help them to defend themselves against hyperdimensional entities. The organisation was headed by Cornwall until he retired in 1955 with the rank of Lieutenant General, a knighthood and an anxiety disorder, though PISCES regularly consulted with him until his death in 1961. Said to have been because of liver failure due to alcoholism. His legacy was a PISCES committed to fighting the other war, though everything would change in the 1968 investigation into the Severn Valley. Okay, that concludes part 2 of this series. The next part will go into the infiltration of the Shan. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like and share it, and make sure to subscribe for more Bud Explains videos in the future. Bud out.